we are going to learn about a very important concept in NetSuite: the forms, and specifically, we will be focusing on entry forms and transaction forms. Understanding how forms work in NetSuite is absolutely critical. Once you clearly understand the difference between entry forms and transaction forms, a lot of things in NetSuite will start making sense to you, especially when it comes to customization, scripting, and process automation. Let's get started. What are entry forms? First, let's talk about entry forms. Entry forms are the forms we use to enter and maintain master data, information that is relatively permanent and reused across the system. Some examples of master data entered through entry forms are customers, vendors, contacts, chart of accounts, items, units of measure. These are the core building blocks of any business operation in NetSuite. Now, where can you find entry forms? You simply navigate to the Lists menu. Under Lists, you'll find different categories like customers, vendors, accounting, items, and more. Under each of these categories, you'll see the option to create or view the master data using entry forms. Entry forms are usually configured by the administrator or the department heads. DACY ensure that only the relevant fields are shown to keep the data clean and standardized. Entry forms are super important because the quality of your master data directly impacts every transaction and every report you run in the system. What are transaction forms? Now, let's move on to transaction forms. Transaction forms are used when you are creating actual business transactions, the day-to-day activities that generate operational and financial movement. For example, sales orders, invoices, item fulfillments, purchase orders, item receipts, bank transactions, journal entries. Where do you find transaction forms? You go to the Transactions menu. Inside Transactions, you'll see different sections like Sales, Purchases, Banking, Financials, and more. Each of these leads to various transaction forms. So, in simple terms, entry forms are for creating the people, products, and structures you deal with. Transaction forms are for recording the actions and movements that happen between those people, products, and accounts. Both are equally important. One without the other would make the system incomplete. Deeper dive into entry forms. Now let's dive deeper into entry forms. Let's take an example. A customer entry form. If you navigate to Lists, then Relationships, then Customers, and click on New, you'll see the customer entry form. On this form, you'll find fields like company name, parent company, email address, phone number, billing address, shipping address. Each of these fields is what we call an entity field. Entity fields are used to store unique information about a particular entity, in this case, a customer. You'll also notice tabs inside the form like Financial Information, Communication, System Information. Each tab groups fields that belong to that specific customer. For example, the company name must be unique for each customer. The tax registration number, if used, is also unique to the customer. One key thing to remember: entry forms only have one set of fields per record. There is no concept of multiple lines or repeated data entries inside one entry form. Everything you enter belongs to that one customer, vendor, or item. Similarly, when you open a vendor entry form, by going to Lists, Relationships, Vendors, New, you'll see the same pattern. Vendor name, email address, phone number, payment terms. Again, All of these are entity fields that are unique to that specific vendor record. Deeper dive into transaction forms. Now let's look closely at transaction forms. Let's take the example of a sales order. You would navigate to transactions, then sales, then enter sales orders, and click new. The sales order form opens up. At the top of the form, the header, you will see fields like sales order number, customer name, order date, status, memo. These are called transaction body fields. Now, here is something very important. Body fields are unique to each transaction. That means, for every sales order, there is only one sales order number, only one order date, only one customer selection. You cannot have two order numbers or two dates on the same sales order. Each transaction carries its own distinct set of values at the header level. Now, when you scroll down in the form, you'll come across the Items tab. Here, you can add multiple items to the sales order, like products or services that the customer is buying. Each line under the Items tab has fields like item, quantity, rate, amount, description. These are called transaction line fields. Unlike entry forms, transaction forms allow you to have multiple lines under a single transaction. So, for one sales order, you might be selling 10 laptops, 5 mobile phones, and 20 chargers, each on a different line. Each line item is separately recorded under the same transaction. Similarly, when you open a purchase order, you will notice the same structure. At the top, transaction body fields, vendor name, date, currency, terms, and then below, transaction line fields, where you list out the items you are purchasing. Key differences between entry forms and transaction forms. Let's now summarize in simple words. Entry forms are for master data, contain only entity fields. No line items are involved. Each record is unique, representing one customer, one vendor, one item. Transaction forms are for day-to-day business activities. Contain transaction body fields at the header. Contain transaction line fields at the detail level. Body fields are unique per transaction, like one sales order number, one order date. Line fields allow multiple items to be listed inside the same transaction. This is why it's so important to understand the difference. Because when you work on customizations, workflows, scripting, or even reporting, you need to know whether you are dealing with an entry form, a transaction body field, or a transaction line field. Getting this foundation strong will make everything else you do in NetSuite much easier and much faster. I hope now you have a very clear understanding of the difference between entry forms and transaction forms in NetSuite and why it matters so much. We are going to summarize the differences between entry forms and transaction forms in NetSuite. And I will show you how they are connected through simple examples. Let's dive right into it. Entry form example. Customer form. Let's first talk about entry forms. Entry forms are used to create master records. For example, the customer form belongs to entry forms. Now, let's create a new customer record together. Let's fill in the details. The customer name is ABC. The currency for this customer is USD. The payment terms are net 30 days. The tax registration number is 12345. And the address is address 1. Once we save this, we have created a unique customer record. Now, an important point. We will create one unique record for each customer. We do not create the same customer multiple times. Each customer record is managed uniquely. based on their specific details like name, address, currency, and terms. Transaction form example. Sales order. Now, let's move on to transaction forms. After creating the master customer record, we can now create different transactions against this customer. For example, let's create a sales order. When we create a sales order and select the customer ABC, you will notice something interesting. The customer name automatically appears. The currency is already filled as USD. The payment terms are shown as net 30 days. The tax number is already populated. And the address details are automatically pulled in. Why does this happen? Because the sales order, which is a transaction form, copies the information from the customer master record. That's why it's very important to create the master record carefully and accurately, because any mistake in the master record will automatically flow into every transaction. More transaction forms linked to customer. Now let's look at some other transaction forms related to the customer. For the same customer, we can create a sales order first, then an item fulfillment for shipping, followed by an invoice for billing, and finally, a payment when the customer pays. All of these transactions, fulfillment, invoice, and payment, will copy the data from the original customer master record. And remember, you can create multiple transactions against the same customer. There is no limit, you can have as many sales orders, invoices, or payments as needed, but they all trace back to that one customer record. Entry form example, supplier form. Now let's take another example of an entry form, this time, a supplier or vendor. Again, we are creating a master record, this time for a supplier. Let's fill the details. The supplier name is A1 Food. The currency is USD. The terms are net 30 days. The tax registration number is 12345. The address is address 1. Once we save this, the supplier record is created and stored in the system. Again, just like customers, each supplier is unique and has its own record. Transaction form example, purchase order. Now, let's create a purchase order for the supplier A1 Food. When we select the supplier on the purchase order, the supplier name is automatically filled. The currency appears as USD. The payment terms show as net 30 days. The tax number is copied. The address is pulled from the supplier record. Again, the purchase order, which is a transaction form, copies all this important information from the supplier master record. Similarly, when you create transactions like item receipts, when goods arrive, vendor bills for invoicing, payments for paying the supplier, each of these will automatically pull data from the supplier record. So again, you can create multiple transactions against one supplier. Key understanding: entry versus transaction forms. Now let's summarize everything in simple words. Entry forms are used for creating master records like customers, vendors, items. Contain only entity fields, simple, one-time information for each record. Each record is unique and created only once. Transaction forms are used for creating transactions, sales orders, purchase orders, invoices, payments. Contain both transaction body fields and transaction line fields. Transaction body fields are the top part of the form, things like customer name, date, order number, and they are unique for each transaction. Transaction line fields are used for listing multiple items or services inside the same transaction. So, the main idea to remember is: master records come from entry forms. Transactions happen through transaction forms. and transaction forms reuse the information from the master records automatically. I hope now you have a very clear understanding of what entry forms and transaction forms are, how they are related, and why they are so important in NetSuite. Master your entry forms carefully because every transaction in the system will depend on them. Are you ready to become a NetSuite developer? Do you want to stand out in the ERP industry? I have created a new course just for you. It's called NetSuite SuiteScript Developer Course From Zero to Hero. This course is designed for beginners and professionals. You don't need any coding experience to get started. Step by step, I will guide you from the basics to the advanced level. You'll learn SuiteScript 1.0 and 2.0 from scratch. You'll build real-time scripts using real-world examples. We will create user event scripts, client scripts, suitelets, and much more. This is not just theory. These are real problems I solved for an actual client. I turned that experience into a course that's simple, clear, and practical. This course will help you understand how NetSuite scripting works, gain confidence to work on real projects, and grow your career with in-demand skills. If you want to become a NetSuite developer, if you want to learn in a clear, hands-on way, then this course is made for you. The course link is in the description below. Join now and start your NetSuite journey today.